Good evening, everyone. For those of you here in the room, for those of you watching online, my name's Rob Patterson. I'm the pastor here at New Hope Community Church, and I have no role tonight other than that we are hosting this. And it's interesting because we were at the last one here as well, and I learned a lot of things. And my wife and I also 5 years ago bought a piece of property with 20 acres here in town. So tonight applies to us as well, and I'm interested in learning. And like I said last time, I just want to say thank you to all of the people, the levy committee people, who have given so much time and energy. And everyone I've talked to, from the levy committee to the superintendent, everyone has said to me, not, oh, we're just hoping like crazy this gets passed, but like the main heart is we want people to have accurate information to make the best vote. And I just really appreciate that, and we're excited to be able to host this. So thank you so much for being here.
All right, my name is Molly Kern. I am one of the 3 co-chairs. I have Roger Stitzline over here. He's my other co-chair. Most of you know him from all the years of agriculture that he has been dealing with for years. My other co-chair is Carrie, and I know she's watching online because I think she's very ill, so she stayed home today not to infect all of us, so we appreciate that. Also Jordan Lance, he's done a lot of fundraising for us, and he's been integral part of getting information out to people. And then I have Kara Armstrong down here. She handles the money. I spend the money. She pays things, so it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing that we have together. So first of all, I just wanted to go over a little bit of our agenda. Also wanted to give a shout out to Garmin Miller, which is Tim and Monica. They are representatives from our planning committee. This didn't start just like a few days ago. We've been planning for a couple years, and Garmin Miller's been there, and they help you through the process, and they help all of the process. So that's been very good. So they're here if we have questions or something we can't really answer. They would be the ones that we would turn to because this is what they do. So we're real excited about that. So agenda-wise, we have invited, as a levy committee, we invited the superintendent to come and share the information. Just so you guys are aware, she's got to only give facts, so she's going to give a presentation, but she's here on our invitation. And then we do have our state representative, Daryl Kick, here today. He came to represent. He's done after this term. I believe he's had his time as our state representative, but we wanted him to join because he's very known in the community for agriculture. So, and then we're going to have Jordan Lance speak about the Homestead Act, and then we're going to have Roger talk about our CAUV and how you qualify and all that information. So the purpose of the meeting is we just want the district to be informed, just like Rob said. Our job is not to tell you how to vote. We just want to make sure that you're informed on how you want to vote. We want to make sure you have facts, because we feel that the facts somewhat speak for themselves, but we want to make sure that you guys can cast an informed ballot. So what this will not be is a debate on whether the school levy should be on the November ballot. It's already there. We're going to have a discussion we're not going to discuss how schools are funded. That was founded to be unconstitutional years ago. We understand that we don't agree how schools are funded, but we don't really have a choice. We want to come together as a community and try to figure out what we're going to do to fix our schools. This is going to be shame or blame game. Voting is personal to you, so we want to make sure that you there's not going to be any negative or attacking or anything like that. And we are definitely going to make sure that we're not having any exaggerations, any falsehoods, and any fear. We're just hoping to have an open discussion tonight. And we'll go to the next slide. And I guess you don't want to say anything today? You're good? You're good? I don't care. You want to say anything? You're welcome to. This is your time. Okay. I put him on the spot, just so Daryl Kick is coming.
Is this on?
It should be.
Okay, maybe you can hear me anyhow.
Is that on?
Well, I'm sure you can hear me anyhow.
Yeah, this is a long time coming to get a project like this done. I mean, things have been tried for many different years in the past, including way back when we had the opportunity to have all new schools with a man's name written on the side, and the community didn't want that. So this goes back quite a ways, where there's been talk of getting this done, but it hasn't happened to this point. And now here we are. I'm the Bud School. My grandma was born in 1908, and that's where she went to high school. It's things are aged out. We get it. And I think part of the problem, and this is me speaking, with the past try with the levy, when we had tobacco money being spent on schools, there was some angst about demolishing the high school at that time and completely starting over. And I think that the community was more willing to do some of the smaller grades, but maybe not the whole thing. And again, right or wrong, here we are. So we haven't had the best setup with that campus style, in my opinion, and that's something that would need to be addressed to attract families, as well as the smaller education buildings. As far as the state goes, yeah, we're in my 4 terms, there's never been a time we didn't increase school funding per child. We've had differences of opinions on how that money should be spent, whether it should follow the child or not, and things like that. But we've always increased the budgets. We've done what we can with that. The one thing that we've got a problem when it comes to school buildings is our area is kind of land rich and income poor. But that doesn't translate well in the model that's set up for how funding gets sent out to different districts. There's a handful of us that have been behind the scenes, if you will, working on that, but in Columbus, sometimes it's slower than molasses in a cold January day. So that we haven't got resolved yet, but there are a handful of districts like us that feel like we've been kind of held back, if you will, on some of those funding models for building projects. That'll continue to be something that we're going to work on, but if this levy can get passed, I think that'll go a long way for at least our area. But I more came tonight just to kind of fill in some gaps if there were some questions. I'm not an expert on everything. That was kind of a joke. I'm not an expert on much of anything. But I read and I try to get caught up on every topic, and people come in and tell me why they need something, and then we make a decision, yes or no. And this is one of those topics where somebody would come to us and say, do we need this or not? Can we make do with what we have? And I think maybe I'll tip my hand here a little bit, but I think we've been doing that. So I'm looking forward to seeing how we can get this across the finish line and help our community, because the one thing that would hurt me the most is to say, well, it's time to merge. We've been down that road with just Perrysville. That's a tough one to swallow for communities to kind of give up their ownership, their identity. So let's see what we can get done and be productive in our questions.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to say also thanks to New Hope Church and Beth and Rob for letting us have this beautiful venue again, because they've been very helpful just giving us this stage so that we can make sure we're getting proper information out. Next on our list is Jen Ellarding. She's our superintendent. She's only been with us a year, but feels like she's done a lot in that past year. So she can't speak on a lot of things when it comes for the levy, but she's here to give you a lot of information, okay?
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm gonna check. Can I use this? All right. I like to move around a lot, so staying in one spot is not necessarily a good thing for me. So, want to thank everyone for being here this evening. It's a beautiful night. It's a gorgeous night, and I know that a lot of our farmers are out working hard. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to record tonight, and some of those individuals will be able to go back at a later time, check this out. And then certainly, you know, the invitation is always open if there are any questions to contact me, and we'll get that information out. But my portion this evening is just what Molly had shared. I am required just to share facts, factual information with all of you. It is not my position to be here to sway anyone for, sway anyone against. Legally, I'm not allowed to do that, or I can be prosecuted by law, and I'm not really interested in being prosecuted anytime soon. I did get in some trouble when I was younger, but I was never prosecuted, and I didn't do anything really bad. So, I'm not interested in starting that right now. But again, I am here for facts and information. I will also put a disclaimer out if the conversation starts to turn towards why you should vote for or why you should vote against. I'll probably step out in the hallway just to be respectful of that conversation that's taking place and to distance myself from it. But I'll hang out and then I'll pop back in and I'll be here to answer any questions that any of you have. So tonight we're here to talk a little bit about CAUV. My portion this evening is to kind of talk about how we got to where we are. I've had a lot of questions about how we got to where we are, what work has been done, what work hasn't been done, and so that's part of that informational component this evening. We'll talk a little bit about the financing of the project. You'll have an opportunity to answer any questions. I can talk a little bit about the CAUV component, how we calculate that, but I can tell you what, Mr. Stitzline over here, Roger, I'm telling you, he knows more than CAUV than I probably would. I can talk about the calculation, but when we start talking about soil types and things like that, I did take a soil class in college. However, that was a long time ago, so I'm going to defer to him on those components. But so the reason that we're here tonight is as a result of a community survey that was completed in 2022. So that was prior to my arrival in the district. The Board of Education had consulted with a group and they went out to the community and had a survey that was completed by members of the community, parents, families, students, educators. It was out for the whole Loudonville-Perrysville community to respond to. And so the top 3 areas that were identified in that survey were facilities, safety, and technology. And so when I arrived in Loudonville-Perrysville, one of the first things that I did was to ask for a copy of that so I could see what things were important to members of our community. Those 3 things were the main 3 things, but there were also things that stood out related to communication from the district and how we're communicating with members of our community. There were concerns about other things that were happening inside of the school, curriculum, academics, but these were the 3 main things that were addressed. So based on this, the Board of Education had entered into an agreement with Garmin Miller in 2023 to start to look at how we are going to address our facilities. It was, again, feedback from the community that kind of started this process. That actually started before my arrival also. So when I came here to LP last year, we had a greenhouse that needed to be built. We got that done, so I'm certainly really excited about that. The kids have been out in the greenhouse and doing a lot of really great things. And then we also started looking at what are we going to do with the rest of the facilities. And so the process that we went through, the Board of Education gave me the task to kind of oversee this project. And it was important that we had members of the community involved in that particular decision and the recommendation that was going to come to the board. So beginning of last school year, not this school year, a little over a year ago, I had sent an invitation to over 60 members of our community. It was very important to me that it was multi-generational. It was also important to me that we had members of the farm community, business community, we had parents, we talked to students throughout the process, we talked to teachers, but specifically for the task force community, I did not want it to be heavy with board members, with educators, individuals that worked for the school. I wanted it to be heavy with the community because I didn't want the educators to monopolize that conversation and to drive something that they wanted. It was important to be driven by the community. So that task force ended up being a group of about 45 of the 60 members said that they would participate. So I was pretty happy with that. I would have liked a few more to be a part of that. We also reached out to individuals that had concern in 2004 and 2010 with the approach that the district took, and I invited those individuals to sit at the table with us as well. I wanted to try to make sure all opinions were being heard. So we ended up with about 45, and then from there we worked a year,
And then we had community meetings last spring where we came out to the community, shared a couple of different options that we had. Community members in both Perrysville, we had a meeting there, we had a meeting in Loudonville, provided feedback. Based on that feedback, we came back together and then we presented the recommendation to the Board of Education. And when that recommendation came to the Board of Education, it was members of our community that presented that to the Board of Education. I assisted in that, but it was members of our community that were a part of that. I guess I should have turned the slide a little bit earlier, huh? So this explains the whole process. You can see here some of the members at the high school that joined us for the task force community, getting input, reviewing options, and providing a recommendation. Out of the task force responses and conversation that we had, these were some of the things that were prevalent: HVAC, functional spaces, safety, accessibility. The ones that are in yellow, those were the ones that were the biggest concern of our task force committee. So they wanted it was important to them to be transparent, to be cost efficient, have simple, clear explanations, and make sure that we really did a good job educating our community on why we made the decisions that we made. So we had lots of conversation about that. We also did some educational visioning with our teachers. Our teachers work in classrooms every day with our kids. They're our most important, we're a people business. They work every day and influence the lives of kids, so we wanted to get feedback from them, from our custodians, from all of our classified members. And with our educators, they were having conversation about learning spaces and how they should support today's learning methods. They talked a lot about technology, hands-on learning, being able to get up, move around in the classroom, have groups, have flexible furnishings, encouraging teachers to collaborate. We now have, in some situations, we have co-teaching with students with disabilities and intervention specialists, and it's a really neat process to see. They also talked a little bit about outside providers. So we're required by law to service students with disabilities. So for example, I think you all know Caden, my little guy Caden, right? When he got done with chemotherapy, he needed services. He had to have occupational therapy, physical therapy. We have lots of students who need these types of services. These services are provided in the school setting. Again, we have lots of kiddos that do that. And the thing that we heard from the teachers was that we were taking some closets and making them spaces for students to learn, receive therapies. We have students that receive therapies in the hallway as classes are walking by, and so they were concerned about privacy for those students, making sure that they could receive their services in a proper setting with proper equipment. Support community use, so they talked a little bit about what could we do to open up this potential, whatever we decided to allow community to come in. We talked a lot about maybe a walking track, a community room, and so those were some of the things that were really important to our educators. And then at the end, they also talked about, and it sounds trivial when I say it, but they talk about incorporating the outdoors, natural light, and circulation of fresh air. When I first came to Loudonville, I think I met a group of boys at McDonald's, and they had no clue who I was, and I went up and I started talking to them, and I always asked the kids, what do you like about the high school? Or what would we do to make things better? And I tell you, every student tells me that they love the open concept. And I'm just like thinking, okay, this is like a safety nightmare to me, and during the rain and snow. Okay, well, I figured out the kids want to be out in the light. They like to have light because some of the classrooms don't have any windows and they don't have air circulation. So if you're in building 1 at the high school, there's 4 rooms right there in the center that don't have access to any of that. And so when I dug in a little bit more, they talked about, we want to get fresh air because we don't have fresh air in our classrooms. And so I heard it through, through conversations with our teachers and with our students. So these were some of the feedback from our educators. And so we started looking at a lot of different things over the course of the last year. And one of the things that we were looking at were our current facilities. As you came in today, you saw a bunch of pictures and video that were up there of some of our facilities, some of the things that we've dealt with over time. Some of those things have been addressed and been corrected. But those are things today. You know, today at McMullen, we came in and we had steam lines that were leaking. We had 3 gaskets that were blown. Steam was blowing everywhere. Classrooms were really hot in the morning. We had to shut the boiler system down so we could address that. And then, which I'm like, seriously, this happens all in one day. We had 2 sinks that were overflowing that were clogged. So we had to go from there to there. And then what was the last thing that happened? I can't even remember at this point. But we had all of this stuff happening over at McMullen today. So it's just an example of stuff that happens. So minor little trivial things that you see often, you know, get pushed aside on the priority list because other things bump up so quickly. So these are some pictures of Bud. I'm just going to kind of go through. We do have building tours this Friday. We have 9, 12, and 3 o'clock. There's some sheets out front there. You can join us at Bud, high school and McMullen. And then the 21st, 22nd, and the 23rd, we're going to have building tours as well. This picture right here, I actually found this out about 3 weeks ago. If you, I'm sure you all are familiar, that staircase that goes down into the cafeteria behind Bud, right there in between the playground and the building. Do you all know where I'm talking about? So this is the wall. The district had this wall professionally restored about 10 years ago and spent, I think it was close to $20,000 to have this wall restored, and this is what it looks like today after the 10 years are up. I think I need to pull out the contract and see if there's a warranty. But I'm thinking that should not look like that after 10 years. It should look like it's in a better spot. This is an example of a teacher workroom that we also, you see a couple chairs there. That's a small group spot where we can pull kids into, and so when it's not being used by teachers for things that they need for their classroom, we pull kiddos into that space. This is the auditorium at Bud. This right here, these pictures come out of a 5th grade classroom at Bud. This is Maya Schweitzer's classroom. And last year, she had kiddos in that classroom, and it was, the sewer smell was really strong. So we'd get the kids out of there, and then it got better, and so we'd bring them back in, and it just on and off, kept going, and the kids were just like, this is just terrible. And it got to the point that it was so strong that we had to start going through the walls to try to find out what was going on. We ended up finding this pipe right here. You can see that huge hole right there. That is a sewer line. So sewage was seeping out through that hole there. I don't even know if it's a hole. It's almost kind of cut in half, almost. But please understand that at Bud, and in this particular area, we had to go in behind it too. So you see the brick wall that's there. We had to open that up from the other side. So when we're talking about preventative maintenance, it's really difficult to do preventative maintenance when you have these pipes that are behind brick walls and concrete. So we had to bust out the concrete on the front side. You can see some of the mesh there, and then the other side was the brick wall. The class was displaced for about 3 weeks, but we got them back in, and we're currently using the space right now. This particular device right here is a device that we have used to transport students that are in wheelchairs. So I don't know if you know, I walked around the building and I counted how many staircases there are. And so, you know, if you're an individual, you know, that has a physical disability and you need access to accessibility, whether there are 10 steps there or 2 steps there, that's a barrier. And so we have 37 separate areas in the Bud building alone where there are staircases that need to be navigated by individuals who are in wheelchairs or with physical disabilities. So what happens here, we're gonna have this on display at Bud this coming Friday and the end of the month. The wheelchair sits on this platform. They lean it back. You can see the headrest that's right there, and it literally climbs up the stairs. And so that's what we would use if we have individuals with disabilities. I will tell you this particular piece of equipment, there are a couple of things that are wrong with it right now. So we have not used this. We've not had to use it, fortunately, here in the last couple of years. But if we're in the situation where we do need to transport someone with a disability, that piece of equipment is a little less than $20,000 to get a new piece of equipment. So I've also had people ask me about not wheelchairs, but elevators. You can put an elevator in there and you can get somebody to the 2nd floor, but there's steps to get up in the bathroom once you're there. There's 3 or 4 steps to get up in the bathroom. There's 3 or 4 steps to get down to, you know, the auditorium or to the locker room. So there's a lot of steps. So even if we added an elevator, we would still have to have a device like this, just because even within classrooms, there are stairs going into the music room. There's stairs down into the music room. We have stages in classrooms as well. So that's what we'd use. This is the new Bud floor. We had, you can see some buckling there. We had put a new steam boiler in Bud, and what was happening, and it didn't happen with the last boiler, but with this boiler, the steam was rising up, and we couldn't find what the source of moisture that was causing the buckling. Well, it was a new boiler. So the steam was rising, and it was hitting the floor, and it was causing it to buckle. So Shane and his crew, they've tackled that now. They've Jimmy rigged it a little bit, so that way the moisture is no longer causing the floor to buckle. These are just some pictures of classroom spaces at McMullen. You can see some of the heating systems that are in the classrooms. There's another classroom at McMullen. Some of the bathroom facilities. This particular classroom, this was Miss Lozier's classroom. You can see, I don't know if you can see, but hopefully you can, there's a crack that goes along there, and then there's a big gap right there. I got a call last year that her classroom had a crack that went from one side of the classroom to the other along the wall. And so that was kind of concerning. So we went over, we checked it out. Shane ended up looking at it a little bit. Well, about a week later, I got a call from another teacher who was on the other side of her, and her floor started to drop. Well, then we started to see some dropping in the hallway as well. So at that point, I got a little nervous. I'm a little conservative. So we contacted a structural engineer out of Dublin. He came up because at this point, I'm thinking, are we safe? These rooms in this space is right above our cafeteria where elementary students eat lunch and breakfast. So they came, they looked at it, they gave us a list of to-dos of things that we could do to try to address it, but it's nothing that's going to be a permanent fix. The way that they put the floors in is a way that they do not put floors in anymore, so until we completely redo that flooring structure and system, we're gonna continue to have to address those. Our current floors are asbestos. You'll see as I go through some of the pictures, you'll see lighter tile. That's where they have been abated, and they've put new tile in. And some of those are areas that we continue to address with new tile. Some structural issues here at the high school. Here's an example of one of the high school classrooms. I believe this is one of the interior classrooms that's in Building 1. Some of the sinks, some of the technology. This was the water main break last year that happened outside of the high school. We had the kids on buses already, and I got the call. We had to cancel school, so we had to send the students back home just because we had to shut down the water for the day. I will just shout out to the village. They sent their vac truck up and helped us and get the kids back the next day, so that was appreciated. These are some of our ceilings at the field house. You can see our bleachers there, visitor bleachers. They try to maintain those and fix some of those. We're going to try to go out to bid for some new bleachers because they're they're getting to the point that they're really a safety concern. Some of the bathrooms. That was some of our educational visioning. And so what we did then is we took all of that information and we decided, how do we want to address things? And the goal was not a new building from the very beginning. We looked at all of this information. We started gathering data about how we want to fix things. And one of the things that we knew that we were interested in is free money, right? Everybody wants money from the state. And so we started working with the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission. And so that's the entity within the state that we need to engage with in order to receive funds. At one point in 2004, we did have a 50-50 split. The state was willing to give us 50%. That did not work out at that point in time. The community did not vote in favor of that. So 2010, I believe the district went out again. It was 40% state share, and obviously that didn't work. And so here we are today. We are currently at 29% state share. What I can tell you is we're a lapsed district. So what that means is that any point in time that we want to get back in, we can re-engage with OFCC and we can have access to those funds. It's based on what that percentage is for the year. This past year, it was 29%. And I will tell you, there was some conversation that was brought up about the state share. That's frustrating for our community. That's really frustrating for our community. It's frustrating for the school district. I can tell you, Lexington, Ohio. All of you, I think, have been to Lexington. Lexington's a very nice community. They just got 53% state share a few years ago. So the state believes that Lexington, Ohio, we are wealthier than Lexington, Ohio. And I'm not saying that our community is not a nice community, because I love it here. We have land here. Our family's from here. But I'm telling you, we have a lot of doctors and lawyers and big houses sitting in Lexington, Ohio, and they're getting 53%, and we get 29%. And so I'm really frustrated by that, but that's been the formula. I know that we've had board members that have lobbied to try to change that. I don't know, and I don't believe that they use CAUV value when they're looking at that. So when the state's looking at our district and they're looking at the land value, that's what brings us up. So that's frustrating, something to know. I've also learned a lot of rules through OFCC. We're allowed to have the 29%, but we have to kind of go by certain rules that they have. So the one rule that they have is if you are a district that's under 1,500 students, they recommend a one building solution. And I mean, it makes sense. So you don't need to maintain 3 cafeterias. You don't need to maintain 3 offices. You don't need to maintain 3 of every single thing. So I do understand that they want that to be more efficient. And when you have 1,500 kiddos, you can put them into one space and you can share some of those things. You can look at personnel differently. You can look at a lot differently. But if we deviate from that plan of the state, we're not guaranteed the 29%. So that's where it starts to become a little bit of a concern. Well, if we want to do a 2-building option or a 3-building option, we can, but that doesn't mean we're getting the 29%. And so that was a concern when we were looking at things through the task force. Also important to note, career tech spaces can be co-funded, and we can receive funds for like our ag program, for industrial tech, those things. However, in Lownville-Perrysville, we don't have enough students in those programs. And I know you're looking at me like, seriously, we have an ag program, we just built a greenhouse, we have all of these great things going on. They only look at juniors and seniors when they calculate that. So we have a lot of juniors and seniors that would like a non-traditional pathway. They want to go to the Career Center, they want to look at different things, options for what they want to do when they graduate high school, and that's great. Like, I love that our kids are going there. However, we don't get any funding then because of that, because of those numbers. So those are just some things to be aware of. Next thing that we started doing is we started looking at, I need to go back there, the facilities analysis. So in order to fully renovate McMullen, and I am talking putting in air conditioning, completely redoing electrical systems, plumbing, new doors, desks, furniture, lighting, all of the whole kit and caboodle, you're looking at, and this information is from 2023. I did not apply the cost adjustment for this last year, and then there's going to be a new one coming up. So the cost adjustment, there's going to be 2 cost adjustments that's going to need to be applied here soon. But we're looking at McMullen at $11,500,000. Budd Elementary, to completely renovate that space, would be a little over $24 million. And Loudonville High School, 24.5 is what that looks like. $24,500,000 or $500,000. So bringing the total district assessment to about $60 million. Keep in mind, if we're renovating 3 spaces, we don't know if we're going to get that 29%. So you're going to see more of a local contribution towards that. And again, that $60 million, this last year we had about a 5%, was it 5% or 7? 7, no, it was 7, I think it was 7. 7% cost adjustment. And so add another 7% onto that, and then whatever comes up here in April will be the next cost adjustment. So, sitting at about 60 million there. We also started looking at the educational analysis. If you go to the district webpage, we have the facilities analysis on. If you go to the top right and you click on the master facility plan, it will give you the report from the state. It's about 45 pages each for each building, and it goes into detail what we need to do to fix the buildings. That original assessment that was completed by the state was completed in 2009. It was updated with Garmin-Miller, but honestly, the state did not come in to update that in this past year, because in 2009 they felt that it was so detrimental that they didn't see a need to come in, so many years after, because it would be in the same space, same spot. So there were some additional things that have changed though over those years, which we would have to do in addition. It also looks at the educational analysis. So they're looking at learning spaces, they're looking at spaces used by children, and so they've notated you could get a total of 200 points on their assessment. You can see McMullen scored an 89, Bud scored a 100, and high school, and again, this is in 2009, scored a 98. So in all of those, they mentioned learning spaces being undersized, no space for small group, remedial work, very little privacy for students, counselor, mental health services are undersized, handicap accessibility being a concern. At the high school, that's a little less, right? I mean, if you've been to the high school, that's more accessible than the other buildings, so, but that was noted because we do have a few areas where there's some accessibility issues, but again, certainly not to the point of some of the other buildings. So then we started talking about options. Like, what do we want to do about this? So, of course, the first option was renovating new facilities. We talked about renovating McMullen, adding 4 through 6. So let's completely renovate the building. Let's add 4 through 6. We also talked about a brand new pre-K facility, adding a gym, renovating the high school, leaving the high school the way it was. We talked about building a pre-K 6 and just doing a gym and not doing anything with the high school. We also talked about a new pre-K 12 facility. These are all the things that we were looking at. There's also one of my favorites, the just add air option and a gym. And we've heard that throughout the last year that, well, let's just add air. Let's add air and let's add a gym, because those are two of the main concerns that we're hearing. Well, just to add air, you're talking $2 million at McMullen, $4.8 million at Bud, $4.7 at the high school, and that's just the HVAC component of it. Right now at McMullen, we cannot put window air conditioners in all of the classrooms because our electrical operating system would not even handle that. So we would have to completely update our electrical system, we would have to update plumbing, and then there would be construction costs because you would be busting through, walls. So just to add air, you're talking probably around $22 million for that, and then a competitive gym on top of that is another $11 million. So you're sitting at about $33 million just to add air and to have your competitive gym. And so when we looked at that, we're like, wow, right around 33 million, 50, you can get all the classrooms. So those are the conversations that we were having, and we were really going back and forth. We talked a lot about, McMullen and what can we do at that space? Can we add on? Can we salvage that building? OFCC also has recommended acreage. So based on the number of pupils that you have in a building, you need to have so many acres apparently. So those were some of the things that we really had to navigate, but we went through a lot to be able to get to the plan that we were, that was recommended to the board. Building tours, we visited Shelby City Schools, we also went to Ayersville, and then we also went to Liberty Center, just to look at some of the schools that were designed by Garmin-Miller to see what type of things that we would want to try to incorporate into the recommendation that we have. These are some of the elementary classrooms. You can see the cubbies off to the side. I'm going to try to go through these quickly for you. This is a small group learning space. They're utilizing a lot of the hallway space for groups and meeting with kids. In this particular building, they have pods by grade levels. So they would bring the grade levels out and they would do things out there, have class meetings together as an entire grade level. Here's an example of a high school classroom, STEM classroom, another outdoor seating area for high schoolers. Same type of concept here at Shelby. This was one of the gymnasiums at Liberty Center. This was not their main competitive gym. This was a secondary gym that they had. This was Ayersville. This was their main competitive gym. And this district, again, is a little bit smaller than what we are here in Loudonville. But in the back, you can see there was a wall, and then it opened up to another gym. And then on this side, closest to us, there was an area that could be opened up, and the band could sit on the stage and play when the kids were performing in the gymnasium. Locker rooms, band. This is an example of a cafeteria. We know that if we have to vacate Bud, that we will no longer have an auditorium. So the state will also not co-fund auditorium type of spaces. Music in my opinion, is an important part of our kids' educational programming. So I'm a little disappointed that that would not be a space that would be co-funded. However, designers have then started to look at how can we utilize space that's co-funded for dual purposes. So I told Mrs. Sprang, Angie, that we were going to go look at a cafetorium, and she was like, okay, Jen, yeah, whatever. So I took her along with us. That's the cafeteria there at Liberty Center. This is another angle of it from the stage. And this particular space here turns into that. Isn't that amazing? That's amazing. So I've got the thumbs up from Angie. She certainly would like her own space for kids and an auditorium, but this was a thumbs up from Angie too. So if Angie gives me a thumbs up, I trust her, and I think that I would go with that. Art spaces, again, some different art spaces, library spaces, some additional library spaces. I apologize that it's a little wavy. The air is causing it to shuffle around a little bit. This is another example of cafeteria. Well, let's just tell you, Shane would love to have these. So Shane and the maintenance crew at Shelby, if you walk around Shelby, they have these little doors all throughout the building, and when you open them up, it provides access to all of the utilities. Just one little fun fact for you, I learned again a couple weeks ago. At McMullen, we have our kindergarten and our preschool on the first floor. And we do not have bathrooms in every classroom. However, we do have bathrooms in our kindergarten and our preschool classrooms just because those kiddos need assistance, need support, need to be close to a bathroom. And I asked Shane how he fixes the pipes whenever there's an issue. So there is a basement in McMullen, and there's also a crawl space. And once you get into the crawl space, it goes down to probably, I don't know, maybe 3 feet high. Shane has to army crawl underneath the McMullen building to get to the pipes, and then he lays on his back like a mechanic and he fixes the pipes. So that's currently what he's doing to access some of the pipes in behind the walls and under the floors. So this space, Shane spent a lot of time looking at that and admiring it from afar. This is an example of a therapy space. The space that we were looking at would not be as big and beautiful as this. Our space is much smaller, just providing what is needed. Shelby had a donor that stepped up and was able to provide some additional funds to make this space happen for some of the students that need therapies. One thing that we did like, though, through all the buildings that we went into is the tribute to the history of the district. And so you can see Shelby here. They have, you know, the timeline and the history of their district up. They have a pretty neat little hallway there that you walk through and you can go through the history of their district. In Ayersville, they had different pictures throughout the building of just athletes and graduates from overtime. And so that was some of the other information that we looked at. So the facilities analysis, the meetings with the teachers, the meetings with the task force committee, looking at all of the options led us to two different options. And the two options that the task force committee had decided upon were both pre-K through 12 spaces. We went out, we talked to the community in the spring of last year. We had a meeting in Perrysville, had a meeting in Loudonville. People voted at those meetings, and we came up with the option that we're recommending today. And so you can see the timeline of the work that was done, where those meetings were held, when they were held. This was our Loudonville community meeting that was held at the Lions Club on April 29th in the spring. So this is the current site at the high school, just an aerial view for you to see. So up here is the stadium, down here is where we're looking at the high school. The plan would be, if the levy were to pass, to put a pre-K through 12 facility at the high school. Kind of zooming in a little bit, you can see up here at the top, you have your gym area. You have your VOAG down here at the other end. Right here at the bottom is where our brand new nice greenhouse is. The two buildings in the middle, the cafeteria building and then the library building, those two buildings would be gone eventually. We would keep the gym. It's a gym, right? We have very few gyms in our district. We have children, elementary kids that are in our gyms that bud. Sometimes I leave at 9 o'clock at night and we have elementary kids coming in at that point in time. So we need gym space. So we would keep that. We would do some renovations there. We would also keep the VOAG classrooms. We don't get co-funding for Career Tech. We thought that we could renovate that. It's close to the greenhouse. Also, we didn't want to spend the money to invest in district offices in a new space. I don't need a new space to be in. Throw me in a classroom over there in that particular building and we can make that work. So the district offices would probably move here. Maintenance would also move there. We have an art classroom and there's a garage that's a part of that. Art would move into the high school and then we would have a spot for maintenance in that building as well. So trying to use what we have to move some things around. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. So this particular space right here, again, that's our ag space. Right here, this particular purple wing is where the high school wing would go. So what we need to do is we would need to build out this top portion first. So where's it at? There we go. Everything from the red line on up would be built first in the first phase. And the reason for that being is if we were to knock down these two buildings, building one at the high school is where almost all of our classrooms are. And so while construction is taking place, we don't have a secondary location with a bunch of classrooms of where we can put students. So it would be phased. We would build the elementary component up top here. You can see there would be parking in the back, so alleviate some of the parking out, the congestion out front. Staff, teachers could park back there. Playgrounds would be in the back. You have your elementary wing here. In the middle would be those shared spaces. So when we talked about not having 3 cafeterias, we would have 1 cafeteria there. There would be a competitive gymnasium there, and then there would also be another gymnasium. So we would have 2 gymnasiums here. We would keep this. It would be a 3rd gymnasium. So you'd have a competitive gymnasium, then you'd have like a multi-purpose type of gymnasium there, because we'd have kids coming in and out of those spaces and probably be using all 3 of those gyms throughout the day. So there's that. So what we would do is we would bring our high school kids into this space for 1 year. We would buy high school furnishings that could be transferred to the high school portion when it's done. But they would be there for a year. These 2 buildings would come down. Then we would build that out. We'd pull these high school kids down into the high school wing, and then we would bring over the students from McMullen and Budd Elementary. So the timeline on that, you're looking at about a year of design. So if the levy would pass, if the bond issue would pass, we'd have about a year of design. I would really be pushing to try to get something in the ground next year about this time. You're talking a couple of years of building that, moving the kids in, and then the secondary component would be about a year and a half additional to get all of our kids on one campus. As we talked, we then started looking at cost analysis, right? We want the entire 29% from the state. We also want to make sure that we're not building more than what we need, right? We want something that we're able to be in, that we can grow a little bit, but we don't need 75,000 additional square feet than what we have, right? So there was a neighboring district that just built, smaller district than us. They built about 75,000 more square feet than what we're proposing in this particular project. So these were the numbers here for the co-funded, what the state will help participate in. Also in the co-funding, we're required to put the abatement and demolition of Budd and McMullen in there. Doesn't mean that's what we need to do, but we're required to put that in the cost of it. So we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. The next piece was locally funded. So again, their state has rules about what can be funded and what can't be funded. So things like renovations to the shop, like the ag shop, ag area, shop area, those would be things that we would have to do. We'd also have to relocate the softball field. If we're wrapping that building back behind the gymnasium, all of you know that the softball field is there. So what we would do is we would take that softball field and flip it over onto the other side of the baseball field. Baseball field would stay, softball field would go over, and then we would shift that practice field down. So that we have enough space there that we're able to do that. We also heard and had some conversation about metal roofs. I learned a lot about metal roofs. Some of the members of our farming community had educated me about the importance of that, so that was something that they wanted to make sure that was included. Underground detention. So these are just some of the things that we had talked about to add. There's the 7% cost adjustment, the state share of about a little over 15.5. District is putting in a little over $2 million to the cost of the project, leaving us at total cost of 53.5 million. So once we kind of looked at the numbers, then we're like, well, how are we going to finance this? What does that look like? How is that going to impact members of our community? And so early on, we started talking about a tourism tax or a bed tax, a sales tax. And these are things that the district cannot do. We cannot put on a sales tax. We cannot do a tourism bed tax to fund a building. That's beyond the school district, so those were things that were eliminated. Property tax, you all know, how schools are funded. That is primarily through property tax. We also talked about an income tax. We talked about that a lot. We talked about different options of what we can do with an income tax. And I've shared some information out about that. So when we're looking at income tax, important to know that if you're going to issue an income tax for a bond issue, you can only go out for 23 years. So you know how that is. If you take out a loan, the fewer years, the more your payment's going to go up. So 23 years is the longest amount of time that you can do an income tax for a bond issue. It's also very insecure. So we were told by financial advisors that to be very cautious with considering that as an option. If you have an individual in your community that makes $1 million a year, they might decide that they're going to leave. They're going to go live somewhere in Hawaii somewhere. I don't know. If you have $1 million, maybe I suppose you could go do that if you wanted to. So that income then would leave the district, and so that would no longer be a valuable way to bring money into the district. So also, it accompanies a higher interest rate because it's such an insecure way to fund a project. So we were a little bit nervous about that, but we still continued to go down the road with it, and we thought, well, what if we do a 50-50 split? What if we do 50% property, 50% income? That seems to, maybe satisfy what we're hearing from some people that were concerned about it being solely property. So, as an example, if we did a 50-50 split, if you are an individual making $50,000 a year in income, you would be paying $625 a year. That's just for the income. And then you would also be paying the property on top of it. So for example, if you had 100,000 in market value, that's an additional 168. So you're looking at little under $800 a year with a 50-50 split versus a 353 for every 100,000. So that is the reason why we were looking at the property tax and the route that we kind of recommended to the board. I'm happy to talk about that further. I mean, I have some more information on that, but I just wanted to walk you through that one particular example. You know, if you have, you know, two or three people in your household and you're making, you know, 100,000 between all three of you or two of you, you know, you're looking at about $1,300 a year plus then your property on top of that. So that was a concern. So right now we're currently looking at 53.5, little under 10 mils. We are required to have a half mil in there for maintenance. Are you guys gonna talk about how to calculate that? Okay, so I'm not gonna go into that because I've already been talking long enough anyways, but I can help you with that process if you want help, but you need to go to the auditor's website and look at what your market value is, or if you have CAUV, that's calculated differently. You need to look at your CAUV and your improvement and add it together. Your market value, that won't matter with this. You're looking at those two things. If you don't have CAUV, then you're looking at that market value. I will tell you, I've talked to a lot of people that have said to me, well, I can sell my house for $200,000. So they think that it's $200,000, but it's not. If you go to the auditor's website, that market value is not necessarily what you can sell your house for. It's usually less. And then what you need to do with CAUV and with a residence that's non-CAUV, is you need to times it by 35%. So you are not taxed on that total amount. You take that total amount, you times it by 35%, that gives you your taxable value. And then you apply the millage to that. And again, they're gonna go through it and I can help you with that. We have some additional information on the school website about that and how you can calculate that. I'm gonna go through a few frequently asked questions that maybe some of you might have because this is just what I've heard. And then I'm gonna open it up and you can ask any questions that you want. First question that I've heard is, what is the impact of utilities, right? We've been comparing, I know that Hillsdale recently has built a new building and they've had an increase on utilities. And so what is the impact gonna be on the Loudonville-Perrysville district? Well, I can tell you there will be an impact because we are now circulating fresh air into the classrooms, right? So that's gonna be something that's gonna add to the cost of things. We also have air conditioning. You know, my husband, he puts in furnaces and air conditioners for people all the time. And when you're running those systems, you know, you're pulling and you're creating more of a cost to your house and in this case to a school. So I spent a lot of time looking at utility bills here. So just want to share some things with you, make sure I have everything. Hold on tight here. Last school year, in utilities, we're talking water, gas, and electric. The district spent $184,000 on water, gas, and electric. That's a big bill. That's a really big bill for all of the space that we are currently operating. Our neighboring district, they went up to about $330,000. But my question was, how many square footage? You know, what's that square footage comparison, right? Because it's not, you're not looking at apples to apples if you're not comparing it to the square footage. So when you look at that, they're about 30,000 square feet more. I'm calculating in bus garage and keeping those two additional buildings. So we're gonna have right around 208 square feet with everything that we're completely responsible. They have an additional 30,000. So average in the state is about $1.25 per square foot. So if you took Hillsdale and you took their square footage, you took it to $1.25, that would equal about $300,000. They had some issues with their HVAC system. They've notated that, so that 330 should come down, and it should be pretty close to the 300,000. So if we're looking at our district, and I just took the 125 and I just applied it to everything, we will not have air conditioning out in the bus garage. We will not have air conditioning in the field house. I just took the total square footage. That would increase our utility bills by probably a little under 75,000. So, but keep in mind, we're also spending about 509,000 per year, an additional 200,000 above and beyond what the PI levy is coming in right now, dealing with things that we're dealing with. So, just some things to think about. When does the annual cost adjustment take place? That takes place in April of every year. So just because it turns April 1st, there will be a cost adjustment. Last year's cost adjustment was 7%. I think it was 5, 3, and then one year there was a 17% cost adjustment. So I don't know that I would want a 17% cost adjustment there. Just some examples of things that the district is doing to demonstrate fiscal responsibility. I've only been here about a year, but I've really been working hard to look at staffing in our district. Over the course of the last year and a half, we've eliminated one administrative position. This year, we're starting this year with 3 fewer teachers than what we had last year. We also have 1 less classified person, and we also have an additional contracted service person that we do not have. So we have about 6 less staff members than what we have had in the past. I think that there's maybe some more room to right size our district, and so we'll be looking at that. So as people leave, as people retire, we look at that. Do we need to replace positions? Sometimes it's difficult because by law we have to have certain teachers that have licenses to teach certain things. So, you know, you have to make sure people are properly licensed in their area. So we can shift a little bit, but in some areas that's difficult. So we've spent a lot of time really looking at some of those things, especially with personnel, because in a district where we have teachers, and I mean, we're a people business. So if we're going to impact our finances and try to make cuts, that's the area that's going to give us our biggest bang for our buck. So we've been looking at that when we're looking at fiscal responsibility. What will happen to the 1.5 PI mill that currently was passed? So the 1.5 mill levy that was just passed this year is in place for 5 years. So at the point that if the bond issue passed, we would be going into the buildings right about the time that that would be due. My recommendation to the Board of Education would be to let that lapse, to not renew that. That would drop off $41 per 100,000 of the market value. So I think that, you know, that would be appreciated by members of the community. We already have the 0.5 built in. I think that we'll be fine with that. So we would probably let that lapse. We would need that in place for the next 5 years, however, because even if we were building, we still have to maintain these facilities that we're currently in right now. I will tell you, though, I've been pretty picky. They wanted to replace a floor in one of the offices over at McMullen, and I'm like, don't touch that floor. You know, I'm like, if we're going to be potentially vacating that property, then we're not spending money to put a new floor in. Like, we can deal with that floor for a few more years. So they probably cringe whenever I look at requests sometimes. I've also been asked this question. You know, what happens if things come in, they're greater than expected, you know, the taxpayers are going to be responsible, you know, you're going to need more money. We're not allowed to bring in more than the 53.5. So I cannot adjust that. That's a set amount that's brought in. What we would have to do, though, if something happened, is we would have to look at our project and we would have to look at where are we going to cut. Does the district have money that we can contribute to offset that cost? I will also let you know that there's a $3.7 million contingency built into that plan for the district. The builder also has contingency in there. And through the LFI piece that we talked about earlier, we added some additional funding for that underground detention that I just found out about a grant, so I'll be looking at that. So we do have some leeway built in. We cannot exceed that 53.5. Again, that's a set amount that's brought in. There was a report in the shopper that the district is receiving an additional $600,000 above and beyond the increase update. Is this accurate? This is not accurate. Last year, about the time that the PI levy was on, they did the update. You know, taxes, property taxes went up. We communicated to the community that we were receiving an additional $970,000. We had committed at that time to utilize those funds for facilities, buildings, maintenance. So we just received that first payment in from the auditor. That was about $600,000. The treasurer at the last board meeting let the Board of Education know that that first payment came in, and we were going to look to transfer that into the 070. The 070 is like the building and maintenance fund. Once money is put into that account, it has to be spent on facilities, building, maintenance. It cannot be spent on salaries, cannot be spent on benefits, anything like that. So that money is going, that 600,000 of the 970, not in addition to, will be shifted to that 070 here at the next board meeting. When I saw that, I was like, oh, I didn't know we got an additional $600,000, but that's not true. What would happen to Bud and McMullen if the bond issue passes? If the bond issue were to pass, for me, I think it's important that we have conversations with the community. So the community paid for these buildings. There's a lot of emotion, memories, and things that are tied to these buildings. And so we need to have some conversations with the community. I know that in other communities, some schools have been community type of places. I know that they've sold them, and private investors have purchased them, and some districts have abated and demolished them. So lots of opinions out there. People have been sharing their opinions with me about what they think should happen, if we get to that point in time. But I think it's important that we get information from our community to make those decisions at that time. We also have to remember we have to talk with OFCC, because OFCC has to approve anything outside of that. And so sometimes, depending on what you want to do and what you present to OFCC, they'll say yes, and sometimes they'll say no. So just because we want to do something doesn't mean that will be something that will be signed off by OFCC. Let's see. So this came in here recently. How do the recent interest rate cuts impact our project? So when we did the formulation on all of this throughout the past year, we were looking at an interest rate of approximately 5%, is what we were looking at. That's a little bit lower than what you would see if you were to go refinance your house or to get out a loan, because when the bonds are sold, those investors do not have to pay taxes on it, and school districts generally have better credit ratings. So 5% is that calculation. If we were to calculate it today, I've been told that we would probably be calculating it at about 4.5%. That can change, right? I mean, I'm not saying that can't change. It could go up, it could go down, but based on what we've seen here recently with some of those cuts, that's what we would be projecting. So we could be potentially, if we're able to lock those interest rates in at a little bit lower than what we had originally projected in here, we could be saving about $5 million over the life of the loan. So that would be that potential impact. But again, until you lock in, you can't predict that. Outside of CAUV, are there other exemptions available? Yes and no, depending on your situation. I know the homestead, they're going to talk a little bit about that, what that looks like. And so I've helped a few of our senior members of the community with that and talking with the auditor. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else here. Does anyone have any questions for me? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this is probably just kind of a stupid minuscule thing, but with one cafeteria for 3 schools, are we going to be eating lunch at 9 a.m.?
No. So the size of the cafeteria would be much. I mean, if you go to the McMullen cafeteria, you can only fit 1 grade level there at a time. So we would have elementary grade levels eating together. So we would probably have 3 lunch times that we would have. They would just have more students in that space at one time.
Okay, because I was just thinking you might have to extend the time of the lunches as well to account for serving and whatever.
Yeah, yeah. And that, you know what, that's a good question. I mean, that's a good statement. You know, depending on the serving lines and how we do that, the high school has 2 serving lines. McMullen has 1. You know, Bud has 1. So hopefully we could design things that would be a little more efficient to get kids through. So, yep, that's a good point. Yep. Any other questions or things that you'd like to share? No? Well, I tell you what I'm going to do, because I know not everybody likes to go up to a microphone and talk. You know, I'm going to go hang out in the back. I'm going to let the committee continue with what they want to share, and I'll just be outside. If any of you have any questions, you can privately ask me any questions. You can call me. I'm available to help answer any questions that you have at any time. So I'm going to turn things back over to, who's our next person? Right. Oh, yes, ma'am.
I haven't been home from work yet today, so is this, the rest of this gonna be recorded that I can pull it up on your website? I'm struggling finding this stuff.
Okay. So if
Was this recorded or is it?
it is,
On YouTube, it's, we're on YouTube link, it's gonna be recorded.
yep.
And the rest of our portion is not gonna be recorded.
Short? Okay.
So if you, also, if you go, here's our district webpage. If you go up to the top, here's a master facilities video. A lot of it we covered today, but there's also the master plan. And so if you go to this page, you can look at, you can have the printout that we just went to today. There's the FAQ, information from all of the community meetings. If you want to look at those facility, if you, in all your free time, since you haven't been home, if you want to pull up the facilities assessment, this is the 56-page document that I talked about that the state did on our district. You can look at it there also. So that's how you can access all of that information. All right, Roger, I'll turn things over to you. Well, you don't look like Roger, so I'll give it to Jordan.
Thank you, Jen. I thought that was super comprehensive of how we got to where we are. I think that is what we want the district to do. Jen gets to work all day on that stuff. We're all volunteers that are just trying to make sure we get information out to everybody so you can make decisions. So one question we've gotten a lot of, I don't know if I have slides. One question we've gotten a lot of is, you know, is there any relief available for, we know that this is a tax increase, people. It's gonna cost everybody money, including myself. We wanna make sure that those who are hurting the most and have the most need are able to get help, and there are programs out there for that. One that we realized wasn't being talked about at all when we started quoting costs of the levy was the homestead exemption. And this is something that lots of Loudonville and Perrysville people already have, already qualify. Lots of you have already enrolled. This is mostly a program for those over 65 years old. There are income limits to it. The income limit is $38,600 for this year, household income. That doesn't mean that if you have, that doesn't necessarily mean that if you have gross income of $40,000 or $50,000 that you won't qualify. That is adjusted gross income that's in there. So it's confusing to get to that number. So if you have questions about whether you qualify, if you're still in your working years, you're not going to qualify. You're probably going to make too much money or be too young. But if you're over 65 and your income is around that $50,000 mark, I'd encourage you to take a look at the homestead exemption. It would save you about $100 on the new tax levy. If you're not enrolled already, it would save you about $380 next year on your taxes. So it's a really big impact. It also affects those who are disabled or those who are veterans. You can exclude up to $26,200 of your property value. There is also, I want to mention, and maybe this is a question I have for Mr. Kick later, but there's a bill in the State House to actually increase those exemptions and those income qualifiers in the coming years. It's a temporary increase. In my opinion, it would be a hard increase to roll back if it did actually get passed. So that's something that is at the State House level. So there might be, it's possible that there's more relief coming for those who are in sort of a fixed income scenario. So yeah, if you have questions about that, I guess you can direct them towards Daryl. I don't know how much Daryl knows about the homestead exemption at this point, but that's all I've got. I just wanted to make sure everybody, we have an ad running on this too to make sure we'd run some information on this a couple weeks ago, and we did have somebody reach out to us that did not realize they qualified for the homestead exemption. They had a disabled person living at home that's going to save them $400 a year going forward. So it's really significant if you do qualify for this. And then the next one we can talk about CAUV.
Jamie, I'll promise I'll keep it short. Thank you. I'm Roger Stitzline, for those who don't know me, but what I'm gonna do is talk a little bit about the CAUV and who qualifies, but I'm not gonna read this to you. Time is of the essence here, but CAUV is something that's been around for 50 years. It's to help farmers reduce the tax that they pay on their land. And it started in 1974, and what it does, you have to have at least 10 acres and at least $2,500 worth of goods sales from your farm that year. Now there is some exceptions. If you're under 10 acres, you gotta have a plan and you gotta do it for 3 years before they would accept you into it, but you gotta apply for it. But if you're under that, it's pretty hard to save a lot of money. Where it saves money is you own more acres of land, that type of thing. But that's what I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna go over the whole thing. There's handouts here on everybody on that. And you sign up through the local auditor. Just wanted to preface this. We did ask the Ashland County Auditor, Cindy Funk, and the Holmes County Auditor, Jackie McKee, to come here tonight to speak. They both declined. They felt if they came here and talked, that it would be they were recommending for this levy. I asked them, you put the meeting on, we won't even come. But they both declined to do that. So I'm doing this presentation tonight, and they've looked, Cindy Funk, our Ashland County Auditor, looked over this and said she's okay with what I'm saying here tonight. I'm not an expert on this, but I've done a lot of studying on this over the last 2 months. But we'll go on to the next there. If you go into your handouts there and look at the page that says Land Value CAUV, and I've talked to a lot of farmers. I've probably done taxes on probably 300 to 400 parcels for people, to be honest with you. So I can do it just as fast as our computer can, almost, not quite. But what I run into when I'm talking to farmers on this, and there's land, with this reappraisal, okay, the land reappraisal, most of the land around here is around $8,000 an acre if you look on that chart there. It doesn't show up very well on there, but what you got is an average of a 75% reduction on CAUV, which is huge. So if you look at that middle column there, 8,000, and you take a 75% reduction, so you multiply it times 25%. So $8,000 an acre ground is actually valued at $2,000 an acre. When you figure millage, you take 35% of that. So instead of being taxed on $8,000 an acre ground, the tax is figured on $700 an acre. So that's less than 1/10 of what they think they're being taxed on. And I'd say 75% of the people that I've talked to about this don't understand that. And this is where I think we need more education from our auditors. And a lot of people think they're getting a raw deal on this, but I'll be honest, it's a pretty darn good deal. In just my 24-acre farm, it saves us $1,900 a year. Now, you have to meet the qualifications to do that. But we raise cattle, we have some pasture, we do those types of things there. But the biggest thing that I've learned on this is it doesn't matter what your valuation is on the land. And the CAUV is just on the land. It's not on improvements, it's not on buildings or anything else. So the farmers get taxed on their buildings and their home just like anybody else. Where they save is on the land. And what I guess I've learned on this thing is, I know there's been talk about since 1997 it was ruled unconstitutional, and Daryl mentioned some things that have changed on that since then. But it's a huge savings is what it amounts to. And I get the comment, 8 out of 10 farmers saying, we're tired of being taxed so heavy because our land's worth $8,000 and we paid $1,000 for it or $500 or whatever years and years ago. The tax is only figured on $8,000 an acre ground based at $700. And again, some that can change. Some deductions are 70%, but I have one that's 85% reduction. So that's huge. But again, the farmer's still paying taxes. The people that are getting hammered the hardest on this are the newest builds, new homes that are just being built, because they're value is up here. Something you built 20, 30, 40 years ago, the value is a bargain to you. So that's where we're at. Now, farmers that have expanded a lot in the last 10, 15 years, they are paying a big premium. But somebody that has a farm that hasn't done much to it, other than living in the older house and the older barns, the taxes are actually pretty low on that. But as you see, if you look at that $12,000 per acre, say if land goes up again like it is, it's doubled in the last 10 years. So you look at that $4,000 an acre going to $8,000. On a per acre basis, that's only $3.50 an acre when it doubled in price. It's huge. And I don't think very many people understand this. And I don't know about you, but I'm a math person, and I've always tried to figure out my real estate taxes. I live in Ashland County. I can say I can do it now. It's 8 calculations, and I came up with the same number. But I went to the auditor's office, and they worked me through 8 calculations, and I came up with a number. So most people don't have a clue. They just pay their taxes and complain. So again, you need to look at that, but I think a lot of people are misinformed on that. And what I did on the next page here, I'm sorry, on this microphone. The next page, this is a property owner that came to us back in August and said they just talked to the Ashland County Auditor's Office, and they have a 172 acre farm, and they said, Roger, we are for this levy, but our taxes are going to go from $4,600 a year, and they're going to add an additional $5,600 to our taxes. We just talked to the auditor's office. And I said, there's no way that can possibly happen. We're going from 36 mills and adding 10 to that. So that's 46 mills, rounded off 37 and 47. That's a 27 to 28% increase. Your taxes can't double. They can't quadruple. They can't, it's just mathematically impossible to do. So I said, that can't be. That's not how I figured it up. And, you know, but what happened is the auditor's office was telling them to take market value, which the market value on this property here is $1,547,000. They took that times 35%. When what they should have done is taken the two numbers, CAUV, 213,550 and 119,890. Add those together, times 35%, times the 10.24 mils. So on the next page here, you can see what happened. So looking at that there, if you go down through there, their annual tax right now is $4,625, which is 0.3% of the valuation. Not 3%, 0.3%. So if you take the levy and put that on there, the addition is $1,195. So that's going to increase that to less than 0.4%. Now, they were told to figure it this way: $1,547,000 times 35% times the 0.010243, which is 10.24 mils. They were told their taxes were going up $5,548 by the auditor, when it was $1,195. So we asked the auditors, 4 of us went to this meeting, and I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus here, but I have gotten it thrown up this week that their taxes, people's taxes going up 4 or 5 times. They will not call in. I asked the auditor if she would print something in the shopper and just say, if you called in before August 15th, please call back in. You may have been given wrong information, and we were refused. So I asked, would you come and put on a CAUV seminar? And I got a refusal there because they felt it might affect how somebody might vote. So this is one of the things we're battling right now, and this is what our committee has done from day one. We just want factual information. But it cannot mathematically go up 100%. If it was a double in taxes, we'd be going from 36 mils to 72 mils, not 36 to 46. It just can't happen. So that's a little bit of our frustration there. And like I say, that's a huge difference going in there. And then if we didn't have the CAUV, and I know a lot of farmers are not happy with the way this is done, but on the next page I got total taxes, not just school taxes, So if you didn't have CAUV, you'd take the 1,547,000 times 35% times 0.04346, and that's our millage rate in Loudonville Perrysville School District in Ashland County. That's total taxes, not just the school taxes, that's total taxes. About 60% of your taxes go to the school. The rest of it goes to 9 or 10 different entities. The county, the township, the fire district, the mental health, the park district, all those different things. It's right on your tax bill. So without CAV, this farmer would be paying $23,540 a year. So they're actually right now, before this levy, paying $4,625. That's a difference of almost $19,000 a year. So if you're a farmer, I think you're going to be pretty happy with the way CAUV is calculated. And when farmers make up less than 1% of our voting people in Ohio and in the United States, I don't think it's going to get a better deal. I'm just being very honest with you there. So we're looking at that thing there. So actually, what this particular person was told, their taxes were going to go up $5,800. Their taxes are going up $1,195. That's a multiple of 4, 4.5. So we're just trying to point that out because people are saying my taxes are going to double and triple. It's mathematically impossible for that to happen. And then I just threw in a couple other charts here, and people keep saying the good old days, the good old days, the good old days. Well, I came back to Loudonville in 1978 to manage the Loudonville Farmers Equity. In 1980, look across there. Those are some tough years. If you look in 1980, the inflation rate was 13.5%. The mortgage rates were 13.7, and prime rate was 20%. Now, I just did every 5 years here, but in 1981, we were borrowing operating money from the Farmers Bank here in Loudonville, paying 21.5% interest. Now, if those were the good old days, a lot of people went broke. They did. You know, who can pay 13% and 14, 15%, 20% to borrow money at 20%? So the other thing is, if you look here in the 2005, that was the year after we ran our first levy. If you look there, inflation rate 3.4%, mortgage rates 5.8%, and then we look at prime rate was 6%. So in that short period of time, we went from 21% to 5%. And I made the statement to my board of directors back then, we'll never see single-digit interest rates again. Boy, I'm glad we were wrong. We borrowed money at 21.5% in 1981. When I retired 4 years ago, we were paying 3% to borrow operating money. We wouldn't have survived. Nobody would have survived at those kind of things. And then we look at, you know, from 21, 20, 20, into the COVID years, you know, that's when inflation took off. And I don't know anybody could do anything about that. We probably at the time thought it was going to happen, but hoped it didn't. But you look there, and you look at, I put in every year from there, and you look at that, we went from, you know, an inflation, a prime rate in 2023 of 8.5. We had, in 2022, we had 8% inflation. The other misnomer that I'm getting a lot is, this is from the people that are my age. They're saying, we're on a fixed income, and we don't get any adjustment. If you're getting Social Security, 2 years ago I got an 8.5% increase in my Social Security check because it's called COLA, cost of living increases. And then, you know, so the last 4 or 5 years it's been an average of 4.1% increase. So you are getting some adjustments there. Yes, it doesn't cover all of our costs, but at least you're getting something and you're not stuck in that for the next 20 or 30 years. So again, look at the ranges there. We look at inflation rate of 0.1% to 13.5. And then we look at mortgage rates 2.9 to 13.7. And then we look at the prime rate of 3.5 to 20.5. And if you put in 1981, it was 21.5. So there's just something to say, the good old days, those are tough. And the other thing is, and I just put this chart in there, this is something that I started doing when I managed the equity. I just put in historical grain prices on all those years. And we pass this out to our farmers every fall. And one farmer said to me, Roger, corn price is half of what it was 2 years ago. And it pretty much is. 2 years ago, we had corn at $6.45 a bushel. Now it's around $3.60 a bushel. My comment to him, if we would have run the levy in 2022, would you voted for it? There's no good time. And I guess the thing I look at there, and every decision I made in business is based on a 5-year average. So the average price of corn for the last 5 years has been $4.67 a bushel, soybeans $11.05. And there's been some higher years in there too. So that concludes my part of the session. I told you I'd move through it pretty quick, but I think this is something you could take a look at, especially share it with your farmer friends. Our whole purpose of this committee is to give accurate information. And we spend, this crew here, we spend probably 70% of our time trying to put out these fires that aren't accurate. So if you don't trust us, so be it. But I'm telling you, we have not put out inaccurate information. We're trying to make it so people can make an informed decision. And how they vote, that's entirely up to the individual. Any questions for me or anybody? We'll be around afterwards. I know a lot of people don't like to ask in front of a group, but we will be around to answer questions afterwards. And if there's somebody that you know that's got inaccurate information, let us know. We'll go to their doorstep if they'll let us come. That's what we're going to do. We got another 4 weeks minus 1 day, I think it is. Yeah. So we will do that. And we're going to have a meeting next week for the senior residents, and we hope to have a good turnout at the Lions Club building, again, to educate. However you vote, that's entirely up to you. But what I'm saying is, for the last 20 years, they've said now is not the time. Now is not the time. Now is not the time. So, anybody got any questions for us? If not, Molly, do you have anything else to bring?
No, just again, thanks to New Hope for letting us have this facility.
Very much so. We appreciate it. Thank you much. We're adjourned. Thank you.